Commander Kim Hannah pressed her face against the cold metal of the observation deck window. Her breath fogged the glass as she stared into what should have been a field of brilliant stars. Instead, there was only darkness. Complete, absolute darkness. That seemed to swallow light itself. "This is impossible," she whispered to herself, then turned to address her crew. "Lieutenant Park, are you certain our sensors are working correctly?" Lieutenant Park Jinwoo looked up from his station, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air on the bridge. He had run the diagnostics 3 times already, but the results never changed. "Yes, Commander. All systems are functioning normally. The stars are there, we can detect their gravitational pull, their mass signatures, even their heat. But their light." He gestured helplessly at the wall of black space ahead of them. "The light just stops." The UES Perseverance had been traveling through deep space for 6 months, mapping new sectors and searching for habitable worlds. They were far from Earth, farther than any human crew had ever ventured. But nothing in their training had prepared them for this. Chief Science Officer Lee Mingi stood hunched over her console, her fingers flying across holographic displays filled with data that made no sense. "Commander, I'm reading energy patterns along the edge of this dark region. They're faint, but they're definitely artificial. Someone or something is creating this effect." The bridge fell silent, except for the quiet hum of ship systems. 23 crew members aboard the Perseverance, and each one felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. Communications Officer Ensign Choi Daeho suddenly jerked back from his station as if he had been shocked. His earpiece clattered to the floor. "Commander," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I think something is listening to us." "What do you mean, Ensign?" Commander Kim walked over to his station, her boots clicking against the metal deck plates. "I was running passive scans, trying to pick up any signals from inside the dark zone. But instead of hearing something, I started feeling like something was hearing me, like when you know someone is watching you, even when you can't see them." Daeho's hands trembled as he reached for his fallen earpiece. Dr. Lee Mingi looked up from her readings, her face pale. "Commander, the energy signatures are getting stronger. Whatever is causing this darkness, it knows we're here." Kim felt ice form in her stomach, but her voice remained steady. "All hands, this is the commander. We are approaching an unknown phenomenon. All departments report readiness status." One by one, the department heads reported an engineering ready, medical ready, security ready, but none of them felt ready for what they were facing. "Commander," Lieutenant Park called out, "I'm detecting something else. There are objects inside the dark zone. Big ones. They're not ships, at least not like any ships we've ever seen. They vast. The darkness ahead of them seemed to pulse, as if it were alive." Kim had explored dozens of star systems, had first contact protocols memorized by heart, had trained for every possible scenario. But this was different. This felt ancient, dangerous, important. "Take us closer," she ordered. "But slowly, keep all defensive systems ready." As the Perseverance moved toward the wall of darkness, strange things began to happen. The lights on the bridge flickered. Computer screens showed impossible readings for a few seconds before returning to normal. The artificial gravity wavered, making everyone feel slightly weightless for a moment. "Commander," Dr. Lee called out, her voice tight with fear and excitement. "I'm reading massive structures inside the dark zone. They're not planets or asteroids. They're constructed, built by someone with technology far beyond ours." Through the view screen, they watched as the boundary between normal space and the dark zone grew larger. Up close, it looked like a wall of black water, rippling and moving with its own mysterious currents. Sir Ensign Choi said quietly, "The feeling is getting stronger, like there are eyes on us. Lots of eyes, old eyes." Kim made her decision. It was the kind of decision that would either make history or end it. "All hands, prepare for entry into the anomalous zone. Whatever is in there has been waiting a very long time. I think it's time we found out what it wants." The Perseverance crossed the boundary into darkness. Immediately, most of their instruments went dead. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the bridge in red shadows. But in that crimson twilight, they began to see shapes moving in the void around them. Huge, impossible shapes that seemed to bend space itself. And then, without warning, their communications system crackled to life. But the voice that came through was not human. It was old beyond measure, tired beyond hope, and it spoke directly into their minds rather than their ears. "Welcome, children of Earth. We have been waiting for you for a very long time. We are the ones who watch. We are the ones who remember. And you are the next species we must decide whether to save or let die." The bridge of the Perseverance fell into absolute silence as 23 humans realized they were no longer the observers. They had become the observed. The darkness around the Perseverance began to change. What had seemed like empty void now revealed itself to be something far more terrifying. Massive shapes moved through the black space, each one larger than their entire ship. They were not solid like metal or rock, but seemed to be made of flowing energy and ancient thought. Commander Kim Hannah felt her legs grow weak as one of the shapes approached their ship. It was beautiful and horrible at the same time, like watching a storm made of stars and shadows. The voice that had spoken to them came again, but this time it felt gentler, almost sad. Do not fear us humans, we mean you no harm. We are what remains of the first children of the universe. We are the observers. Lieutenant Park Jin-woo gripped his console with white knuckles. Commander, our instruments are picking up ... thoughts. Actual thoughts. These beings are pure consciousness. The space around them shifted and changed like a living dream. Suddenly, the crew of the Perseverance found themselves standing in a vast hall that seemed to stretch forever in all directions. The walls were made of what looked like captured starlight, and floating in the air were thousands of small, glowing spheres. Dr. Lee Minji reached toward one of the spheres, but her hand passed right through it. Inside the sphere, she saw images moving like a movie, a green planet with purple skies, strange buildings that looked like they were grown rather than built, and creatures with 4 arms and golden eyes, living and working together in peace. That was the Kolari civilization, the observer's voice explained. They lasted 8,000 years. They created art that could make mountains weep. They learned to heal any disease. They built cities that floated in their clouds. What happened to them? Commander Kim asked, though she was afraid of the answer. The sphere flickered and changed. Now it showed the same golden-eyed creatures, but they were fighting. Their beautiful cities were burning. Their art was being destroyed. They discovered how to split the smallest parts of matter for energy. Within 50 years, they had turned their paradise into a dead rock. More spheres drifted past them. Each one showed a different species, a different world, a different story, but they all ended the same way. War, disease, environmental collapse, self-destruction. We have watched 10,000 civilizations rise and fall, the observer continued. Each time, we hoped it would be different. Each time, we were disappointed. Intelligence, it seems, is a disease that destroys its host. Ensign Choi Daeho stared at the floating spheres with growing horror. You just watched them die. All of them. Why didn't you help? The presence around them grew heavier, filled with ancient pain. We tried. Young one. Oh, how we tried. We shared our knowledge with the Zareth. They used it to build weapons that could destroy stars. We taught the Milani about peace and cooperation. They used our lessons to create a more efficient form of slavery. Dr. Lee Minji found her voice. So you gave up. You just started watching instead of helping. We learned that help only delays the inevitable. Every species follows the same pattern. They reach for the stars, they touch greatness, and then they destroy themselves. It has happened 10,000 times. It will happen again. Commander Kim walked closer to where she could feel the observer's presence strongest. What about your own species? What happened to you? The hall around them grew darker. The floating spheres dimmed. When the observer spoke again, its voice carried pain so deep it made their hearts ache. We were the Villani. We were the first to look up at the young universe and wonder what was beyond our world. We built ships that could cross between galaxies. We created technology that seemed like magic. We thought we were gods. Images appeared in the air around them. A civilization so advanced it seemed impossible. Cities that spanned entire continents. Ships the size of moons. Beings of pure energy who could reshape matter with their thoughts. But we were not gods. We were children playing with forces we did not understand. We reached too far, too fast. We opened doorways to places that should never be opened. We invited things into our reality that should have stayed outside. The images changed, showing horror beyond description. The beautiful Villani cities cracking apart. Their people fleeing in terror from shadows that ate light itself. Their perfect civilization crumbling in a matter of days. Most of us died. Those who survived ... We became what you see now. Beings of pure thought, hiding in the spaces between stars, watching other species make the same mistakes we made. Lieutenant Park stepped forward. But you survived. Your species didn't completely die out. Survival is not the same as living. The observer replied. We exist, but we do not live. We have no joy, no hope, no dreams. We only have memory, and the endless task of recording the failures of others. Commander Kim felt anger rising in her chest. So that's it. You've decided that all intelligent life is doomed, so you just collect us like specimens. We preserve what we can. When your species destroys itself, as it inevitably will, at least something will remain. Your music, your art, your stories. We keep them safe in our collection. The hall filled with new spheres, and Commander Kim realized with horror that these ones showed Earth. Humans building, creating, exploring, but also humans fighting, polluting, destroying. Your species shows promise, the observer admitted. You have lasted longer than most, but you follow the same patterns, the same violence, the same greed, the same inability to see beyond your own brief existence. You're wrong, Commander Kim said firmly. We're different. The observer's presence shifted, and for the first time, it seemed almost amused. That is what they all said. Commander Kim Hannah. That is what they all believed, until the very end. The hull of captured civilizations dissolved around them like smoke. Commander Kim Hanna and her crew found themselves back on the bridge of the Perseverance, but something was different. The walls seemed more solid, more real than before. Outside the viewscreen, they could see other ships floating in the darkness, vessels from species they had never seen before. These are the testing chambers. The observer's voice filled their minds. Every species that has entered our domain has faced the same trials. Every species has failed. Dr. Li Mingyi looked at the strange ships outside. Some were sleek and beautiful, others were massive and powerful. All of them were dark and empty now. What happened to their crews? They chose preservation over sacrifice, safety over risk, logic over hope. They are part of our collection now, kept in perfect stasis until the end of time. Lieutenant Park Jinwoo felt his hands shake as he gripped his console. And if we refuse your tests, then you join them immediately. But if you face the trials and fail, at least you will have earned your place among the preserved. Your species will be remembered as one that tried. Commander Kim looked at her crew. These people had followed her across the galaxy, trusted her, with their lives, believed in their mission when everything seemed hopeless. She saw fear in their eyes, but also determination. What kind of tests? She asked. The space around their ship began to change. Suddenly they were not alone. Another ship appeared nearby, clearly damaged and drifting. Through their sensors, they could detect life signs aboard weak, but still alive. The first test is simple, the observer explained. Your ship is caught in a gravity well. You have enough power to escape, but only if you use all your energy for propulsion. The other vessel contains survivors from the Keth species. They took this same test 300 years ago. Their life support is failing. Commander Kim studied the tactical display. The math was brutal and clear. If they tried to save the other ship, they would need to use their tractor beam, which would drain power from their engines. The gravity well would pull both ships down into the dark planet below. Every species before you chose to save themselves, the observer continued. It is the logical choice, the practical choice. Save the many by abandoning the few. Ensign Choi Daeho looked up from his station. How many survivors are on that ship? 17. Dr. Li Mingyi reported after checking her sensors. But Commander, if we try to help them, we'll lose main power. We won't be able to escape the gravity well. Lieutenant Park ran the calculations again and again, hoping for a different result. The numbers don't lie. Commander, attempting rescue, has a 73% chance of total failure. We could lose both ships. Commander Kim stared at the drifting vessel. Inside were 17 beings who had faced the same impossible choice her crew now faced. They had failed the observer's test, but they were still alive, still hoping someone would save them. What if we don't choose between them? She said suddenly. Her crew looked at her with confusion. Commander, Dr. Li asked, the test assumes we have to pick, save them, or save ourselves. But what if there's a third option? Commander Kim turned to Lieutenant Park. Can we use our emergency boosters to create a slingshot effect? Park's eyes widened as he understood. If we fired the boosters at exactly the right moment, we could use the gravity well itself to fling both ships to safety. But Commander, the stress on our hull would be enormous. We might tear the ship apart. Better to risk everything trying to save everyone than to abandon people who are counting on us, Commander Kim decided. Do it. The crew worked together with perfect coordination. They had trained for emergencies, but never for anything like this. Lieutenant Park fired the tractor beam to grab the alien ship while simultaneously calculating the exact moment to trigger their boosters. Dr. Li rerouted power from non-essential systems to strengthen their hull. Ensign Choi maintained communication with the survivors, letting them know help was coming. The Perseverance groaned and shook as both ships were pulled toward the dark planet below. At the last possible second, Lieutenant Park fired their emergency boosters. The ship screamed in protest as metal bent and electronics sparked, but the plan worked. Both vessels shot out of the gravity well like stones from a slingshot. Impossible. The observer's voice carried notes of confusion and surprise. No species has ever attempted such a solution. The risk of total failure was too high. That's the difference between you and us, Commander Kim said as her crew worked to repair their damaged systems. We don't calculate the value of lives, we just try to save them. The second test began immediately. The space around them filled with advanced technology, machines that could solve every problem Earth faced. Clean energy, perfect medicine, faster than light travel, everything humanity had ever dreamed of. This technology will advance your species by 10,000 years, the observer explained, but it requires a power source. The Phanari are a primitive species on a nearby world. They have the exact mineral you need. You can take what you require. They will become your servants, but your people will live in paradise. Without hesitation, Dr. Li Mingyi spoke for all of them. No, we don't build our success on someone else's suffering. The benefit to your species far outweighs the cost to theirs, the observer pressed. Millions of your people could be saved. At the cost of enslaving an entire world. Lieutenant Park shook his head. That's not salvation. That's just trading one form of evil for another. Test after test followed, each one designed to make them choose the easy path, the logical path, the path that put their own survival above everything else. Each time, the humans found a different way, a harder way, a way that preserved dignity and hope, even when success seemed impossible. And with each test, the observer's voice grew more confused, more uncertain, more hopeful. The testing chamber shifted around the Perseverance once again. This time, Commander Kim, Hannah, and her crew found themselves facing their most difficult challenge yet. The space around them filled with dozens of ships, all different sizes and shapes, representing species from across the galaxy. These vessels contain the final survivors of civilizations that failed our tests, the observer explained. Each ship holds the last members of their kind, scientists, artists, children, elders, all that remains of one's great cultures. Dr. Lee Minji checked her sensors and gasped. Commander, there are thousands of life signs, hundreds of different species. Your test is simple, the observer continued. A wave of destructive energy approaches. You can save your own ship easily, or you can try to save some of the others. But each ship you attempt to rescue will slow you down and increase the chance that you all die together. Lieutenant Park Jinwoo studied the tactical display. The wave of energy was massive, like a wall of fire rolling through space. Commander, at maximum speed, we can outrun it with 15 seconds to spare. But if we try to help even one other ship, we'll all be caught in the destruction. Ensign Choi Daeho finished quietly. Commander Kim looked at the fleet of refugee ships surrounding them. Through the view screen, she could see lights in their windows. Beings moving around inside. Families huddled together, hoping for rescue that might never come. Every species before you chose to save themselves. The observer said, it is natural, logical, your own survival must come first. But Commander Kim was already giving orders. Lieutenant Park, plot a course that brings us alongside the damaged vessels. Dr. Lee, can we extend our shields to cover more than one ship? Commander, that's suicide, Park protested. We can't save them all. The math doesn't work. Then we'll change the math, Kim replied firmly. Ensign Choi, open a channel to all the refugee ships. Tell them to link their engines to ours. As her crew reluctantly followed orders, something unexpected happened. The alien ships began to respond. Species that had been enemies for centuries started working together, linking their power systems and coordinating their movements. The Perseverance became the center of a growing formation of vessels, all moving as one. This is impossible, the observer's voice carried shock. These species have been at war with each other for thousands of years. They would never cooperate. They're cooperating now, Dr. Lee reported with amazement. They're sharing power, resources, even crew members to help with repairs. The wave of destruction grew closer. The combined fleet was still too slow, but then something beautiful happened. The stronger ships began pushing the weaker ones ahead, sacrificing their own escape to give others a chance. The Perseverance took the rear position, using its shields to protect ships that couldn't protect themselves. Lieutenant Park worked frantically at his console. Commander, it's working. The formation is holding together, and we're building speed. As the energy wave reached them, the entire fleet burst through the danger zone like a single organism. Not a single ship was lost. Unprecedented, the observer whispered. In 10,000 tests, no species has ever achieved total preservation of life. But the trials were not finished. The final test was the cruelest of all. The space around them, filled with images of Earth, but not the Earth they remembered. This Earth was dying. Oceans boiled away, cities crumbled, and the last humans fled to underground shelters. Your homeworld faces extinction, the observer announced. But we offer you a choice. Join our collection willingly, and we will preserve Earth as it was in its prime. Every human who ever lived, every work of art, every song, every story, all kept safe forever, in perfect stasis. The crew stared at the images of their dying world. Commander Kim felt tears running down her cheeks as she watched her home planet burn. Or, the observer continued, return to face certain death with your species. Watch as everything you love turns to dust. Suffer as your civilization joins the 10,000 that have fallen before. The bridge fell silent. This was not a test of courage or intelligence. This was a test of hope itself. The observer was asking them to choose between eternal preservation and mortal struggle. Ensign Choi Daeho was the first to speak. Commander, what if the images are wrong? What if Earth can still be saved? The probability is less than 1%, the observer replied. We have run the calculations based on your species' current trajectory. Dr. Lee Mingi stood up from her console. Probability isn't certainty. 1% means there's still a chance. Lieutenant Park nodded slowly. And even if Earth is dying, maybe we can help. Maybe we've learned something from all of this that can make a difference. Commander Kim looked at her crew, these brave souls who had faced impossible odds again and again. who had chosen hope over despair. At every turn, she thought about the refugee ships they had just saved, species working together who had been enemies for millennia. "We're going home," she declared. "Not to die, but to live, to fight, to prove that 1% chance is enough." The observer's presence shifted, and for the first time in millions of years, it felt something it had almost forgotten. Surprise, mixed with something that might have been admiration. You would choose uncertain struggle over certain preservation. "Every time," Commander Kim replied without hesitation. "That's what makes us human." The testing chamber around the Perseverance began to dissolve, but this time it was different. Instead of shifting into a new trial, the walls of darkness simply melted away, like ice and sunlight. Commander Kim Hannah and her crew found themselves floating in a vast space, filled with gentle, pulsing light. "You have passed all our tests," the observer's voice came to them, but now it sounded tired and confused. "This has never happened before. We do not know what to do with you." Dr. Li Mingyi looked around at the strange, beautiful space surrounding them. "Where are we?" "You are in our true home," the observer replied. "The place where we have hidden for so long that we had forgotten what it was like to hope." The light around them began to take shape, forming into something that looked almost like a city, but a city made of pure energy and thought. As they watched, figures began to appear, tall, graceful beings made of flowing starlight. These were the Volani, the observers, in their true form. Commander Kim stepped forward, no longer feeling afraid. "You're not just watchers, you're prisoners. You've trapped yourselves in this place because you're afraid to live again." One of the light beings approached them. When it spoke, its voice was filled with pain that had lasted for millions of years. "We destroyed our own world, Commander Kim Hannah. We reached too far, too fast. We invited darkness into our reality, and it consumed everything we loved. How can we risk causing such destruction again?" Lieutenant Park Jinwoo looked at the beautiful, sad creatures around them. "But you didn't cause destruction by trying to help others. You caused it by trying to play God. There's a difference. We have watched 10,000 civilizations destroy themselves," another Volani said. "Each time, we hoped they would be different. Each time, they disappointed us. We learned that hope only leads to greater pain when it is crushed." Ensign Choi Daeho stepped closer to the Volani. "But what if hope isn't about knowing you'll succeed? What if hope is about trying anyway, even when you might fail?" The Volani seemed to shimmer with uncertainty. "You faced certain death to save others. You chose struggle over safety. You turned away from paradise to help your dying world. Why? What drives you to make such choices?" Commander Kim thought about her answer carefully. "Because the alternative is to stop being human. If we only save ourselves, if we only choose the easy path, if we give up on tomorrow being better than today, then we might survive. But we won't really be alive." Dr. Li Mingyi nodded. "Every species you tested probably started out wanting to help others, to make things better. But when you showed them how many civilizations had failed, you taught them to fear failure more than they valued success. We showed them truth," a Volani protested. "We showed them the mathematical certainty of destruction. You showed them despair," Lieutenant Park replied gently, "and despair is a disease that spreads. When you stopped believing in the possibility of success, you made success impossible." The Volani began to glow brighter, their forms becoming more solid and real. "But if we hope again, if we try to help again, and we fail again, then you failed together with friends instead of failing alone," Commander Kim said simply, "and maybe, just maybe, you succeed together too." One of the Volani moved closer to them, its light flickering like a candle in the wind. "Your species, you really believe you can save your dying world?" "We believe we have to try," Ensign Choi said, "even if the odds are terrible. Even if we might fail, because the only real failure is giving up." The space around them began to change. The hidden city of the Volani started to brighten, to become more real and less like a memory. The Volani themselves seemed to be growing stronger, more solid, more alive. "We had forgotten," one of them whispered. "We had forgotten what it felt like to believe in tomorrow." Commander Kim extended her hand toward the nearest Volani. "You don't have to remember alone. You can learn again, with us." The Volani reached out with a hand made of starlight and touched Kim's human fingers. The moment they made contact, something wonderful happened. The walls of the dark sector began to crack and crumble. Light poured through the cracks, not artificial light, but the natural radiance of a million stars that had been hidden for eons. The darkness that had surrounded this region of space for so long began to fall away like a broken shell. "The stars," Dr. Li breathed in wonder. "They're shining." Again, through the viewscreen of the Perseverance, they watched as the Volani ships began to emerge from their hiding places. These vessels were nothing like the refugee ships they had saved during the tests. They were magnificent, beautiful craft that seemed to dance through space rather than simply fly through it. "We will come with you," the Volani leader announced, "not as observers, but as participants. Not as collectors of failure, but as partners in hope." The Perseverance turned toward home, but now it was not alone. Behind it flew a fleet of Villani ships, and behind them came the refugee vessels carrying the survivors of 100 different worlds. They were no longer separate species, fleeing toward uncertain futures. They had become something new, a community of hope, heading toward Earth, not to witness its death, but to help write its next chapter. As they traveled toward the distant blue world, the stars shone brighter than they had in millions of years, and the universe itself seemed to sing with renewed possibility.